Ryan Gosling's story does not begin with confidence or applause or red carpets. It begins with discomfort. With a child who never quite fit into the places he was put. A kid from Canada who felt out of rhythm with the world around him, too. Sensitive, too strange, too inward for environments that rewarded noise and certainty. And this sense of not belonging followed him early, shaping him in ways that later became his greatest strength, because long before the world saw him as an icon, Ryan was simply trying to understand himself, trying to find where his voice fit in a world that didn't seem built for people who felt deeply but spoke quietly. And when he entered the entertainment world as a child, it was not a smooth ascent. It was exposure without protection, performance without understanding, a young boy placed under expectations he could not yet articulate. And while others thrived in that structure, Ryan felt the friction, the pressure to be something he wasn't, the confusion of being watched before he even knew who he was. And this early tension planted a seed that would later define his career, a resistance to being boxed in, labeled, or simplified. Because even then he understood instinctively that identity is fragile when it's shaped too early by outside voices. And as he grew older, that discomfort didn't disappear, it transformed, becoming restlessness, curiosity, a quiet rebellion against predictability. And when he transitioned from child performer to young actor, the path was anything but guaranteed. Because Hollywood is unforgiving to those who don't fit its formulas. And Ryan didn't fit easily. He wasn't loud enough, obvious enough, or eager enough to play the roles that were expected of him, and instead of forcing himself into spaces that felt wrong, he stepped back, disappeared for a while, questioned whether acting was even the right place for him. And this pause is critical to understanding who Ryan Gosling became, because it takes courage to step away when momentum tells you to push forward. It takes self-awareness to choose uncertainty over comfort, and during this period, while others chased visibility, Ryan chased depth, studying film, observing people, absorbing silence, learning how much could be communicated without words, and this internal work would later become his signature. Because Ryan Gosling does not perform loudly, he communicates through restraint, through stillness, through what is left unsaid. And that is a risky approach in an industry that often confuses volume with presence. And when he returned to acting, he did not return as someone seeking approval, but as someone seeking truth, choosing roles that felt uncomfortable, emotionally demanding, sometimes commercially uncertain but internally honest. And these choices puzzled people at first, because they didn't follow the traditional path to stardom. They didn't build a clean, easily marketable image. Instead, they built credibility. Slowly, piece by piece, through performances that lingered rather than exploded, that invited the audience to lean in instead of sit back. And this is where Ryan Gosling's journey separates itself from the typical success narrative. Because he never chased being liked, he chased being real, and real is often misunderstood before it is respected. And as his body of work grew, so did the contrast between perception and reality, because the industry tried to turn him into a symbol, a heartthrob, a surface-level icon, while Ryan continued choosing roles that complicated that image. Roles that showed vulnerability, violence, tenderness, obsession, loneliness, humanity, and all its contradictions. And this tension between how he was seen and who he actually was became part of his mystique, because audiences sensed that there was more beneath the surface, a depth that refused to be fully explained or packaged. And that refusal is powerful because mystery creates longevity, and Ryan protected that mystery not through secrecy, but through intention, speaking only when it mattered, choosing projects carefully, allowing silence to do the work that overexposure often ruins. And as fame increased, his inner discipline became even more important because fame amplifies not just success, but insecurity, and Ryan chose grounding over spectacle, craft over noise, patience over urgency. And this patience paid off in a way that no viral moment ever could, because his performances began to define eras. Not trends, they stayed with people, haunted them, inspired them, not because they were flashy, but because they were honest. And honesty has weight, and weight lasts. And what makes Ryan Gosling inspiring beyond acting is that he never tried to become what the world demanded. He became what felt true, even when that truth was quiet, awkward, or inconvenient. And in doing so, he proved something essential. that you do not need to be the loudest in the room to be unforgettable, that sensitivity is not weakness when it is paired with discipline, that depth will always outlast surface, and that sometimes the most powerful journeys are the ones taken inward before they are ever recognized outward, and this inward journey, marked by doubt, restraint, and deliberate choice, is what prepared Ryan Gosling not just for success, but for meaning, because success without meaning fades, but meaning carries you through every stage. And this was only the beginning of his transformation, because as the spotlight grew brighter, Ryan would be tested in new ways, forced to balance art and expectation, privacy and fame, self-expression and public perception, and the way he navigated those tests would quietly redefine what it means to be a modern icon in an industry obsessed with noise. As Ryan Gosling moved deeper into his career, something subtle but powerful began to happen. The industry started noticing that he was not just choosing roles, he was choosing direction. And direction matters more than momentum, because momentum can carry you anywhere, but direction carries you somewhere meaningful. And Ryan's direction was never about chasing the biggest spotlight. It was about building a body of work that could withstand time, criticism, and reinvention. And this meant turning down opportunities that looked perfect on paper but felt empty internally, a decision that confuses people who equate success with visibility. But Ryan understood that every yes shapes your identity just as much as every no, and so he said no often, protecting his craft from dilution, his image from overexposure, and his inner life from being consumed by performance, because he knew something essential, that you cannot give depth to your work if your own life has no space for reflection. And reflection requires silence, distance, and patience, all things Hollywood discourages. And yet Ryan embraced them, allowing years to pass between projects if necessary, trusting that absence would not erase him but refine him. And this trust was not arrogance, it was self-belief earned through discipline. Because when you are grounded in why you create, you do not panic when the world moves quickly. And this became one of his greatest strengths, especially as he began to take on roles that demanded emotional restraint rather than spectacle, performances where stillness spoke louder than dialogue, where pain was internal rather than explosive, and audiences began to feel something different when they watched him, not excitement alone, but intimacy, the sense that they were witnessing something honest rather than something performed. And this honesty slowly built a reputation that no marketing campaign could manufacture, because it came from consistency, from a pattern of choices that reflected integrity rather than strategy. And as his reputation grew, so did the expectations, because once you are known for depth, people expect you to always deliver something profound. And this pressure can become suffocating if you let it define you. But Ryan refused to be trapped by his own image, refusing to repeat himself, refusing to become predictable even within seriousness. And this is where his courage truly showed, because he began to take risks that surprised people, shifting between intense drama and unexpected humor, between quiet introspection and bold stylization, reminding the world that he was not a symbol, not a mood, not a genre, but a living, evolving artist. And these shifts were not random, they were intentional disruptions, ways of breaking the audience's expectations before those expectations could harden into a cage. And in doing so, Ryan demonstrated a rare artistic intelligence, the ability to reinvent without erasing, to evolve without abandoning essence. And this balance is incredibly difficult, because it requires both self-awareness and humility, knowing what makes you distinct, while remaining open to change. And this openness extended beyond acting into how he approached collaboration, often choosing to work with creators who challenged him rather than flattered him, environments where discomfort was welcomed and growth was demanded. And these spaces sharpened him, forcing him to confront limitations, expand emotional range, and trust vulnerability over control. And vulnerability is risky, because it exposes you not just to praise but to misunderstanding. And Ryan was misunderstood at times, criticized for being too quiet, too distant, too serious, too strange. And instead of correcting those narratives, he let the work speak, because he understood that explanation weakens mystery, and mystery keeps people listening, watching, feeling. And as his career entered a new phase, one defined by global recognition rather than niche respect, the challenge became less about being seen and more about staying centered, because global attention amplifies everything: your choices, your silence, your mistakes, your personality, asterisk,